Hey class, welcome to 15.3, Controlling the Water and Fighting in the East. As you recall, one of the primary goals of the Union was to control the waters, control the Atlantic Ocean and the Mississippi River, kind of create that anaconda plan, right, of squeezing the South into submission. Well, the person put in control of seizing the Mississippi River is Ulysses S. Grant. While Robert E. Lee in the South was the head guy from the beginning, Grant worked his way to this position. And one of the ways he got to be the main guy, primary guy in charge, was his success at securing the Mississippi River. By securing the Mississippi River, the North could separate Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and their resources from the rest of the Confederacy. As you can see here on this map, the Mississippi River runs right through a big chunk of the South. And so by the North securing this, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas can't bring their supplies or their men into helping the rest of the South. So it makes it kind of who cares, they're out of the picture. So the Battle of Vicksburg right here is the place where Grant is going to be able to secure this land. Well, this wasn't an easy battle for sure. This was the final Confederate stronghold, and General Grant had a plan for the Union that lasted for 6 weeks, and for 6 solid weeks around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 6 weeks, they bombarded Vicksburg. Vicksburg was located up on a hill on the Mississippi River. The people of Vicksburg were totally shut off from their goods. Notice in this map here how slowly but surely Grant would go past a Confederate defense, defeating them along the way, all the way to knocking out Vicksburg from both the water side and from the land side. And because they had them surrounded like that, the people of Vicksburg, as I mentioned, ran out of food, and they resorted to eating things like mules and rats and their own pets just to survive. And finally, on July 4th, 1863, Vicksburg fell, and the Union had full control of the Mississippi River for transporting goods in and out, but primarily for keeping those states, Texas, Arkansas, so forth, from being able to help out. And this kind of stopped that early momentum, if you recall, that the South had at battles of Bull Run and the 7 Days Battle. Things are going to begin to turn some. So Robert E. Lee, of course, the great general of the South of the Confederacy, decides to make a push northward. Nearly all of the fighting in this war is done in the South, but he decides, I'm going to travel north up into Maryland. If you recall, Maryland's one of those states that was a slave state, but they're part of the Union. As you can see here on this map again, you see Maryland right up here. Maryland, again, is a border state, meaning they have slaves, but part of the Union. Here is Antietam. Notice how far north they are. That's where this battle is going to take place. There are a number of reasons why Lee is going to go north. One, he wants to help free Maryland from Union control. Also, the farms in this area had just rich crops that would help to feed his men. He needed to feed his men. And Lee also believed that if the South could defeat the North and begin to go northward into Maryland, that would bring Britain in on the side of the Confederates. If the British saw the South had a chance to win, maybe they'd come and help. And that was one of the real strategies, of course, that the South had to gain victory. Well, at this battle, Lee and, of course, Stonewall Jackson will split their forces to advance toward McClellan and his army. McClellan, of course, pictured up here with Abraham Lincoln talking strategy, is the at this point, primary Union general. Well, McClellan was able to intercept a dispatch, a message, and he discovered this plan. And so he decided then to move on Lee and divide the military. It's going to really be a key move on his part. McClellan is going to attack Lee's line 3 times in one day, and was one more attack short of victory before Jackson would arrive. The Union was allowed to retreat and a stalemate occurred. This, of course, did cause frustration to Lincoln, who was always concerned about McClellan being too soft. He wanted McClellan to push on and be more aggressive, and he rarely was. But this battle is a key battle. Just, unfortunately, a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths in this battle, but also it kept the British out of the war. Britain will never join the South in this war for a number of reasons, a big one being they don't want to support the side that has slaves. If that hadn't been the case, there's a good chance Britain would have come in and helped the South, and they probably would have won. It is after the Battle of Antietam, by the way, that McClellan gets relieved of his position. Lincoln's pretty upset and really tired of his time as general, and is just frustrated by his lack of aggressiveness. Well, the Battle of Chancellorsville is a really kind of tale of two stories here for the South. Really some positive and bad results. The good for the Battle of Chancellorsville is that it's often considered Lee's greatest, finest work, his finest strategy, and the Confederates showed a great, courageous battle. Notice the location here in protecting Richmond, just south of Maryland. It was a great victory for them. Unfortunately, this battle ends in the death of Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson was Lee's right-hand man, a great military mind. This is actually a picture drawn showing their last meeting together. And maybe the worst part about Stonewall Jackson's death is that he was shot by one of his own men on accident. The weather was cloudy, foggy, smoke, and he took a gunshot wound. And back then, when you got wounded, there was a really good chance you weren't going to survive. Pretty brutal. And the battle at Chancellorsville was very deadly, as so many of the battles were. If you look up here at some of these numbers, 17,000 Union soldiers and 12,000 Confederate soldiers were either killed, wounded, or missing in this battle. Pretty brutal, but a huge loss. This is kind of the high point as far as victory goes for the South, but a huge blow to their morale with the death of Stonewall Jackson. So Lee's been continuing to think about what's my next strategy, what's my next move, and he decides once and for all, I'm going to travel into the North. This whole time the war has been fought in slave states, whether it was a Union slave state or just a Confederate slave state. So he's going to push all the way into Pennsylvania at the Battle of Gettysburg. Gettysburg is the northernmost battle of the Civil War. And Lee thought, boy, if I could, he thought northern support for the war would be lost if he could capture a northern city. Northerners weren't as sure about the war anyway. He thought, if I can capture a northern city, if I'm fighting in northern soil, maybe their support will go away. Lincoln would also remove some of his troops from that area if he thought it was kind of overly safe. But if he knew he had to defend the North, he had to move troops away from the West or other areas. That'd make those armies a little bit weaker. And again, his army could get replenished, resupplied as they passed through this lush Pennsylvania farmland. So he's thinking, I'm going to move north and cause some frustration. And on July 1st of 1863, Lee's men reached the small town of Gettysburg. The Confederate army was surprised to find a Union scouting trip. And so the two sides quickly organized themselves along Seminary Ridge and others along Cemetery Ridge. At the southern edge of Cemetery Ridge were two rocky points called Round Top and Little Round Top. And as you know, the Union is going to secure the spots on Little Round Top, which is going to make kind of all the difference. Be able to attack from the high ground is going to help lead them to victory. Well, this battle lasted only 3 days. On July 1st, Lee forced the Union lines back, but they did not break. July 2nd, Lee attacked the end of the lines at the Round Tops, and that night, Lee planned an attack on the center. And then a real brutal move by the Confederates. In fact, what do we do but just have a huge charge? And Pickett's charge organized. General Pickett, he's going to lead his men across an open, mile-wide wheat field. And Union soldiers killed thousands of Pickett's men as they marched across, charged across. July 4, Lee waited for Union General George Meade to counter. George Meade here, seen pictured as leading the North, Lee leading the South. But George Meade never counterattacked. He held his ground. The counterattack never came, and Lee's men left. It was downpouring rain as they marched back, having suffered heavy casualties. This battle at Gettysburg is key because it is considered the turning point of the war. It's in this battle that momentum swings from the south to the north. If you notice the date, July 4, they stopped their northern movement. On the same day, a couple thousand miles away in Vicksburg, Grant secured the Mississippi River. This is a huge day in this war. Two major battles, Vicksburg, Gettysburg, are going to really help move momentum, move the edge to the Union. But this battle at Gettysburg was awful. 50,000 casualties. Those are deaths or injuries in just 3 days. 7,600 deaths, again 50,000 casualties, and this war is brutal. Following this war, General Ulysses S. Grant becomes the supreme commander for the North as they will continue to push on toward finishing off the Confederates. Confederates had hit their high ground early on at Chancellorsville, but now things seem to be going the way of the Union.